Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this narration of the web series Humans Don't Make Good Familiars. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Book 2, Chapter 31, Jake's Point of View. Just like we were told, Queen Umpera flew into the room from our left, and we received our signal to bow. Once she had landed on her polished metal pole, she said, "Please raise your heads." Her voice sounded young to me, but either Suma and the guide didn't notice, or it was normal to them, because neither of them reacted to it. Even after hearing her speak in the courtroom earlier, it still caught me off guard. Thankfully, my head was down, so I don't think anyone noticed my reaction. I stood up, as did Suma and the guide. It was at that point I noticed that she hadn't entered the room alone. Beside her were 4 large bestial familiars and her guards, the royal mage masters. "I am Queen Umpera, 64th heir of the throne of Ambos, and ruler of our great country." "Great Queen Umpera of Ambos." Suma started introducing herself. "I am Suma of Count Theocoma Isabel's domain, master of the familiar called Sentinel." Now it was my turn. "Great Queen Umpera of Ambos, I am the familiar Sentinel." "It is a pleasure to meet you, Suma and Sentinel, and thank you for answering my summons. Please be at ease," she said. With that, we all relaxed a bit, except for her guards who were busy staring daggers into my soul. "Thank you, Your Majesty," Suma said. "Lady Suma, familiar Sentinel, the reason I have called you here today is simple. I have several questions that I would like you to answer, and concerns I would like you to put to rest," the Queen said. "We would be happy to answer any questions Your Majesty has," Suma said. I decided to let Suma do most of the talking, just in case I accidentally offended the Queen somehow. "My questions are mostly pertained to your familiar, Lady Suma. But I do have one for you," the Queen said to my dismay. "Lady Suma, how did you manage to summon Sentinel? According to what I have been told about you, your familiar is one powerful enough to give even a court mage trouble during summoning, let alone a domination ritual. What method did you use?" "When I first summoned him, he was rather young and much weaker. So he has been your familiar for many years, then. Our records indicate that he was only acquired by you within the last 2 years." "The records are correct. However, I've also spent some time attempting to figure out as well. Eventually, I concluded it was because I used a malefic summoning technique the first time I summoned Sentinel. Although outdated now, it has been taught at my academy at the time as a primary summoning method," Suma explained, although I didn't understand. "I see. Well, that explains how you were able to summon him after he had reached maturity, at least." Suma then spoke to me over our private connection. "I can explain that to you later, Jake." "Well then, Sentinel, are you ready to answer my questions?" "Yes, Queen Umpera, I am." "My first question is simple. Sentinel, who are you?" I'm sorry, can I ask what you mean?" The Queen took a breath. "Sentinel, I wish to speak plainly. You frighten me more than I can express. When I look at you, I am reminded of nightmares I had as a child, of the stories of the Vikings who slaughtered a path across Ambos and all the countries on this continent, and of the carvings left by the survivors of that time. To me, you appear as a monster out of a child's tale. So, Sentinel, I want to know, who are you? Are you a monster, a weapon, or something else?" I sighed. I'm just a guy. I don't know what else to say." There was silence, and I used it to think about my answer. "Queen Umpera, my name is Jake, and when I became Suma's familiar, she gave me the name Sentinel. I am not a Viking, but honestly, you're not exactly wrong. I am probably the descendant of the Vikings. Well, maybe. It's really unclear, actually. Who am I? I don't know. I'm a soldier in your army, a son and a friend to Suma. I'm not a monster." There was another long pause. During it, I could feel waves of anxiety flowing from Suma, and when I looked over at her, she was staring straight down at the floor, and her sparkle had almost completely stopped. "Okay, Sentinel, I choose to believe you," Queen Umpera said finally. "However, I have a request to make of you both. Please leave the royal army." "What? Why, my queen?" Suma asked. "When my father, Queen Umpat, was still in power, and he heard that your familiar Sentinel had defeated a drake in single combat, as well as a magistrate, he immediately consulted his advisors. After much deliberation, they concluded that the best thing to do would be to make him into our country's weapon. When she said that, I felt a lump in my throat. I was shocked, obviously, but not really surprised. I always wondered about that, honestly. However, he died before he could put any of these plans into motion. I breathed a sigh of relief. I take it that you don't have the same plans, then? I asked, that lump still in my throat. I do not. But why ask us to leave your army? Suma asked. Because I do not wish for the two of you to become weapons, especially not ones that may put Ambos in peril. We would not turn against Ambos or you, my queen, Suma said. That's true, I agreed. Personally, I liked this country. It had friendly people, and I was making a killing selling paper last year. I am not worried that you will attack my country, but about how the nobility might use you. Suddenly, it clicked. Ah, I see. See what? Suma asked. Lady Suma, the balance of power in the country, where would you say it lies? The queen asked. With you, Queen Emperor. And why is that? Because you are the queen. And how did I become the queen? I do not know. Because you were born first? Suma guessed. No, I was my father's fourth child and my mother's second. Then, I'm afraid I don't know, my queen. Politics, I said. You are correct, Sentinel. After the death of my father's first child, who was originally going to inherit the throne, several factions formed, and the nobles that supported me were victorious. That's the way things used to be done on Earth too, I said. And now the nobles that supported my actions are given higher priority, and the ones that did not were dealt with. That is why I am the queen, Lady Suma. I see, Suma said quietly. The queen looked over at me, her eyes all but boring a hole into my head. However, I am not a fool. Sendor, your very existence could throw the balance of power into turmoil. Even if Zakasham, your influences, has already caused an upset, or rather, an enhanced one. The magistrate, I asked. As well as his supporters, the queen shook her head and ruffled her feathers. Already I have had to put down an attempted noble rebellion against the Grand Duke. I do not wish for more bloodshed. But will leaving the army really solve anything? I wondered. I do not know. It is my hope that you do not become unwitting pawns during your time there. I cannot, or rather do not wish to, force you to leave the army. However, I can have your mandatory service waived and compensate you if you choose to leave. Suma and I looked at one another. What do you think? I asked. Suma turned back to the queen. May we have some time to discuss this, my queen? Queen Emperor nodded her head. Yes. Please take as long as you see fit. Once you have made your decision, return to the council, and I will meet with you again. End of chapter. Book 2, Chapter 32. Jake's Point of View. Outside the castle, and after our short meeting with the Queen, Suma and I had a lot to talk about. Do you feel like we've had more conversations about major life-changing decisions in the last 2 days than we have since joining the army? I asked, mostly thinking aloud. We knew this trip could change our lives. I suppose it is to be expected, Suma said, now perched on his shoulder as we walked away from the entrance to the castle. Jake, I believe I already know how I feel about the Queen's request, but I want to hear your opinion as well. I don't know. My mum would be happy, and we would definitely be safer, but it feels wrong somehow, I said, and stopped in the shade of a large tree with twisted branches. Suma flew off my shoulder and landed on a knot growing out one of the tree's roots. I sat on the ground next to her and crossed my legs. I agree, Suma said. Really? But I thought you only joined the army because you had to. It is true that everyone at the academy was required to do military service, but I still wish to join. Why? I asked, surprised. Suma wasn't exactly a fighter, so it didn't make much sense. Because of the island of Sangu and the Southern Union forces on it. What about them? 3 years ago, 1 year before I summoned you and you agreed to become my familiar, the Southern Union forces took the island and our country lost contact with it. I remember so many Niema of my city volunteered after we heard what happened. I watched as over 500 Niema took flight and flew for different cities around Ambos to register to join the army. It was inspiring, and I have wanted to do my part in this war for some time now. I am no soldier, but I was gifted in healing magic, so I registered with the army as soon as I was able. While she talked, I was reminded of the documentaries I had watched growing up about September 11th attacks on the Twin Towers. In those documentaries, they always mentioned how recruitment numbers for the American militaries went up after the attacks. The Southern Union takes an island must have been a fairly similar for Suma and the Niama. Okay, I think I get it. So we aren't quitting then. I hope you can understand, Jake. Forget it. I said I didn't want to quit either, remember? Let's go tell the Queen, I said. Suma seemed happy, or maybe relieved. As she fluttered back onto my shoulder, we left the shade of the tree and headed for the castle entrance again. Do you believe that she'll be surprised we decided to stay in the army? Probably. She did offer us a lot if we quit, so she might be disappointed. I would have shrugged, but I didn't want to knock Suma off balance. As we walked, we talked about what we should say to the Queen, but we arrived at the guards again before we made any real progress. You're back already. We only just received the word that you would be returning and to let you in, the guard said, confused, but opened the entrance nonetheless. One of them guided us to the Queen's chamber and waited with us until our guide from earlier met up with us. Back so soon? Good news, I hope, he said and landed on a metal bar. We have made our decision, Suma said. The guide's feathers pressed down closer to his body. I see. Not good news then. The Queen will be disappointed, but it was your decision to make. Once again, he and Suma flew off without me, and I was summoned a moment later. But this time, Queen Ampera was already on a polished metal perch, waiting. Such swiftness in your decisions. I hope that it bodes well for me. Our apologies, Your Majesty, Suma started, and the Queen shook her head, already knowing what was coming. But we have decided to stay within the ranks of the army. I see. This is unfortunate, but not entirely unexpected. She stayed quiet for a moment, and was most likely thinking, Very well, I shall keep my word and not interfere with your time in my army. I wish you both luck and safety. Thank you, my Queen, Suma said, and bowed deeply. But before you go, I want to warn you. The Royal Council may not feel the same way. Be careful. They do not take kindly to being denied, and they would rather burn a fruit tree than let even a single fruit feed an enemy. Be wary of them. With that ominous warning, she dismissed us and told us that we were now free to return to our duties at our squad's base. After leaving the council, Suma sent me back home, and she left to meet up with her traveling group so they could head back to the base. I reappeared back in my room at my mum's house and called out to her, Mum! I poked my head out of the door and yelled, but there was no answer. I checked the phone I left on my bed and saw a text from her from about an hour ago. It read, Jake, I'm going to see my friend Susan in the hospital. She fell and broke her wrist. I won't be back for a while. Call me when you get home. Dang. Hope Susan's okay, I mumbled and called Mum. There was no answer, so I texted her that I was home and that everything went good. After that, I called Robert, my lawyer, to see if there was anything I needed to know about. Hello, Robert answered. Hey, Robert, it's Jake. I just wanted to touch base about the whole detective stalking thing, I said, in my most professional-sounding voice. Ah, Jake, glad you called. I do actually have some news about that. Len, the detective who was stalking you, has been suspended without pay, pending review. That's good, I guess, I said. I told you the system works. All we have to do is file the proper complaints and let the chips fall on her. It's an open and shut case. You can expect a good payout from it, too. Robert said proudly. He got a percentage of any money I made during a case, so he was probably pretty happy, too. Well, I don't exactly need a lot of money, but I guess that's good. Stop by my office when you get a chance. I have some paperwork I need you to sign. Okay. I'm not doing anything right now, so I'll head over. Good deal. See you in a bit. Bye, I said, and hung up the phone. When I travel to Atmosia, I prefer to do it light, so I usually empty my pockets before Suma summons me. The only things I bring with me are the clothes on my back. I used to bring a backpack full of items, but I put a summoning spell on that, so now I don't need to remember to grab it anymore. I just have to remember to keep it stocked with what I need when I come back to Earth. Usually, I leave my key, wallet, and phone in it, just in case. I've finally gotten to the point where I can summon what I need, even while on Earth, but I still can't cast real spells yet. One time I formed a few handfuls of water, and even managed to freeze them, but immediately I felt like I needed a nap. After summoning my bag from Atmosia, I scrounged through it and dug out my stuff, before hopping in my car and driving to Robert's office. 15 minutes later, I was pulling into a car park 3 blocks away from his office. After finding a spot to park, I got out and started walking. As I turned a corner, I noticed another car pulling into the lot. Normally, I wouldn't care, except that I recognized the car. It was Detective Lynn's car, the same one I saw in my neighbor's driveway a few nights ago. She stepped out of her car and ran towards me. So, I started running. At this point, I was getting annoyed. Cutting down an alley, I decided to hide again. It worked last time, after all. Just 2 problems. Firstly, there was nothing to hide behind in this alley. Second, it was a dead-end alley. I looked up, but there wasn't a fire escape in this alley. Perfect, I groaned. Jake Vandal, Detective Lynn said, sounding a bit out of breath as she entered the alley herself. You're a hard man to pin down. End of chapter. I would quickly like to thank our Tier 5 patrons, Dragzoon WRE, Quantum Wednesday, AmbroseKTal, Lord Ashrakal, Bushmaster 177, Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.